So the background is that first, why macroeconomics is very important. It is important because you could if you research a bit on the world economy, and you will realize that there are so many nations which are doing very well. Okay, now example China of course comes to mind when you think of nations doing well. South Korea, South Korea got I think independence close to when we got, and they are a I think a high income nation now, right? So how did they do that? Um, then China, Switzerland is an economy, again a very good example, because Switzerland is like a nation which doesn't really have a lot of its own resources, but still it's like this. It has the highest per capita income in the world. So without natural resources, with a very very rough terrain, they are again a very strong economy. So there are these examples. Then there are examples of places which are like Japan, traditionally a very, very strong economy, but the growth plateaued after a while. Why does that happen? Greece, even with so much tourism, but the Greece economy is not doing well. Venezuela, not doing well. Why? So a lot of it depends on the government, whether we like it or not. What policies do they pursue? Okay, what do they pursue is very important for the economy. So hence macroeconomics is very important to understand and guide on what is the best course of action to take. Okay, so that is the core of why you are studying macroeconomics, so that the right policies can be framed on a national or a aggregated level, right? Okay, so next. Now next, this is an example of where we are coming from today. What are we going doing today? So today is SKM, but before the simple Keynesian model, so you know that Keynes came up with the simple Keynesian model around the Great Depression. Before that, there was no simple Keynesian model. There was no Keynesian economics. What was that? What was there before? Before was the classical economics. Now, more on classical economics in detail, we'll hold it for another class. This is just a snapshot that, there was something called the Great Depression. This is a snapshot, a picture from the Great Depression taken where, families went hungry, they lost jobs, shops were shut, banks closed, millions were unemployed, people were desperate. So what was the economic model to solve all these problems that time? The economic model of classical economics was actually a laissez-faire economy. They said that the economy, if left to its own, can take care of itself. So if there is lack of demand, prices should fall and demand should match supply. Okay, so that was the doctrine which was famous that time. But when Great Depression came, it shattered that doctrine. It said that actually, no, that's not really happening. The economy is not taking care of itself, or it's taking too long a time to take care of itself, right? So um, this is just a statistic of what were the figures in Great Depression. Why is it called the Great Depression? Because there was a almost 50% decline in industrial production, 40% drop in real GDP, 20% unemployment, 33% crash in stocks, 20% bank failures, which means that 20% of the banks closed down, 30% fall in money supply, 2.5 million people displaced. Okay, so that was the state of economy that time. Now, what was the difference in Keynesian economics? A snapshot. Okay, this is a snapshot. Keynesian economics says that, let's say you want your output to be, let's say $20,000 a person. Okay, this is where you want, this is your ideal output level. Okay, now consumers, if this is a time of recession or depression, businesses are not going to invest. Consumers are not going to spend. Okay, besides the essentials. So there is going to be a gap. How do you meet that gap? Needs to be met. That gap can't be left on market sources or market forces to take care of itself. That gap needs to be met, and the only entity which can fulfill this gap is the government. So government actually has a huge role to play in running the economy, which is a departure from let government do its job and let the businesses do their job, separate it out. So this is a departure. This was an argument in favor of letting the government be a part of the whole economic system. So that is the big departure of the Keynesian system. And that is something that today, till today, is relevant. Of course, the model has gone through many changes, but till today, things are, this is the dominant thought, that government needs to actively be involved in taking this economy out of a recessionary or depressionary cycle. All right, so these are two formally. Now, what I discussed with you in words, this is how you formalize it. Okay, so this is the neoclassical economics, neoclassical aggregate supply curve. Now, a lot of you will ask me later. There are many terms. There is Keynesian, there is classical, there is new Keynesian, there is new classical, there is neo Keynesian, there is neoclassical. What is all of that? So again, what is all of that is that when a particular thought comes in, it doesn't come in like, one perfect model at one go. Okay, there's a thought, there is some working behind it, then that thought keeps moving forward, more ideas get added, more people get involved, and together then after a long time, a whole concrete theory takes shape. What you study today as the ISLM model, okay, that has bits of many. That is not pure Keynesian, that's not pure classical. That is a synthesis model. So neo-Keynesian, neoclassical, new Keynesian, new classical are just synthesis of how at different points in time, different economists' contribution gave you the whole picture. So you already study neoclassical, neo-Keynesian without really knowing the names. So I will put the whole thing together again at a later date, not right now. So right now, I'm just going to stick to the words Keynesian and classical and show you the major differences between them. So the first is, as I said, classical. Now, classical model relied on the fact that, let's say, producers are producing at their optimum capacity. So producers are producing at their optimum capacity. So the supply curve is this. Why is this the supply curve? Because this is the output level at which producers are producing at their optimum capacity. Now, to just make things clear to people who are not very familiar, the supply curve is a curve with prices on the y-axis and output or GDP, gross domestic product, in the x-axis. So this is a curve which shows us at different level of prices in the economy, what is the supply which is available. Okay, traditionally supply curves are upward sloping. In microeconomics, our supply curves are upward sloping because the more is my price, the higher is my incentive to earn money. Okay, so let's say the more is the price of a car, the more incentivized will people be to sell it. The shopkeeper will want to sell you the good which has a higher price. So more is the price, more is the supply is the general convention. But in aggregate supply curves, in aggregate supply line of the classical model, the supply curve was vertical because everybody was assumed to produce at the full employment level, irrespective of the price level. The prices could be very low or very high, but the supply was fixed. Okay, so this was the supply curve which was assumed in the classical model. Now, supply curve is vertical in the classical model meant two very grave things. One was that if you draw an aggregate supply curve, so aggregate supply curve is downward sloping, which means that lower is the prices, more will be the demand. So aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. That is the traditional demand curve, which we also do in micro. Now, the point was that keeping a downward sloping aggregate demand curve with a vertical supply curve meant that the power to determine the GDP of a nation was not in the hands of the demanders. It was in the hands of the suppliers. How is that? This is, let's say, AD2 is the position of the demand curve. How much is the output? YFE. How much is the price? P2. But if the demand increases to AD1, What is the output? Still YFE. What is the price? P1. So the demanders in the economy, you and me, consumers could only help in ascertaining prices. They could not help in ascertaining the quantity which is supplied. So that is the notion of the classical economics. Now Keynes completely changed that notion. Keynes said that actually this is not true in the short run. This can be true in the long run. When the economy is operating at its full capacity, it has reached its capacity, then this may be true. But when the economy is not at its capacity, what about during Great Depression? Was the economy at its capacity? What were people supplying everything? Were they still producing irrespective of the price? Not really, right? So what was happening that time? He said that time there was something called excess capacity in production. Right? There's something called excess capacity in production. What is the meaning of excess capacity? It means that people have the capability of producing, but they don't want to because the economic condition is not good. It's for example, today, if you are asked to work for like 3,000 rupees a month, will you work? There's no point in working for 3,000 rupees a month, right? So the economy is at excess capacity. People can work, can produce, but they don't want to because the situation is bad. So he said, in the excess capacity kind of situation, what is possible? So let's just look at the curve from this side, this to this end points. Okay, so what about this side? Now, at this point, when there is excess capacity, you don't need to increase prices to increase output. Okay, so what you can have is something called a fixed minimum price. At this fixed minimum price, people can supply. Okay, so when there is excess capacity, let's say at an aggregate price of, let's say, $5, for example, an aggregate price level of $5, people can supply. So what is the lack? The lack is the availability of demand. Let's say my demand curve is AD3. If the demand curve is AD3, then what will be the output produced? It will be Y0. Now, in terms of recession, the government should play a role in increasing the demand curve from an AD3 to something like an AD2. If the government increases the demand from AD3 to AD2, the price will not be affected, but the output will rise to Y1. Okay, so this was what, and so this was true in two cases. A, in the case of excess capacity, two, in the case of short run denoting that time period when prices are fixed. Got it? All right. So prices were fixed. So in the Keynesian system, prices are fixed because for still a certain level of output, you don't need to increase prices to produce more. Okay, you only need to increase prices to produce more if demand is a lot and you have to increase your capacity for production. But till a certain level, certain prices are fixed. For example, today you go to the market, you want to buy 100 chips, it's fine. It will still be the same price. But if you want to buy maybe 2 lakh chips or 5 lakh chips or I don't know, 5 crore chips, maybe the price changes. So for a certain output level, there is no need to increase prices. So to sum up this entire discussion, the point is now that in the classical system, the demand curve could not influence output. In the Keynesian system, in the short run, up till a certain point, the demand curve could influence output. And that is the premise of the Keynesian economics. How do you stimulate demand in times of recessions? How do you make sure that the economy can be pulled out of a bad situation without waiting for it to correct itself, which could take a very, very long time. So this was just the basic. This is the premise of Keynesian macroeconomics. And now we are going to come to the model, that what is the basic model for government to increase aggregate demand in terms of when it is short run, and when it is there is existence of excess capacity. So now I'm going to do the model. So now the first model that we look at is called the simple Keynesian model. It is also called the model of Keynesian-Cross. So some books will use the Keynesian-Cross. Mankiw uses Keynesian-Cross, which is the simplest book in macroeconomics, which you can pick up and read. So these are like storybook books. They're very nice books. So if somebody has a bad base, somebody doesn't know, please pick up Mankiw and start reading. Okay, and or it could be called simple Keynesian model. So simple Keynesian model, there are some assumptions. It's not a robust model. It is a basic model. Okay, so let me write that down. Simple Keynesian model is a basic model. It is not a full, not complete, not robust model. It has many assumptions. What are those? So the first assumption that it has is that prices are fixed, which is could be realistic in the short run. But it also has an assumption that interest rates are forever fixed, and the reason why it has this assumption, because we basically did not consider any money market fluctuations at that point in time. There is no money market. So interest rate is just fixed at one level. There was not much emphasis also given on the foreign exchange market. So even the exchange rate was assumed to be fixed. So then you must be wondering, ये फिर क्या हुआ? What is the point of this? इसका क्या फायदा हुआ? The point is, this is a building block. ये Lego आपका Lego का first block है. आपने अभी first block लगाया है. तो ये आपको समझने के लिए, to understand the whole thing, and then to see that how realistic or what what is how do you improve it. So this is what you want. This is the this is just to get things started on the question that was asked, that how can the government actually influence demand? The answer will come here by just keeping everything else constant for now. Okay, so these are the assumptions of the simple Keynesian model. All right, so now let's go to the simple Keynesian model. That what is this model? Now, simple Keynesian model is a very simple model. So first, simple Keynesian model is a demand-sided model. What is a demand-sided model? Demand-sided model would mean that we are going to put the entire onus of the economy on the demand side. Okay. Okay, so so it's a demand-sided model, which means that there are literally none. There are no supply-side considerations. Okay, and you will see that. Or if you don't see it, I'm putting it in front of you, that there are no supply-side considerations here. And the reason there are no supply-side considerations is what I've already told you. The reason is that we are assuming excess capacity. So when you are assuming excess capacity, you basically are saying that there is no need to inquire whether the demand can meet supply. supply will be available. And there is no need to change any price to meet that demand. So this is the model. Okay. So now let me take you to the model. So this is the premise of the model. Let me take you to the model. So since there is hardly any supply side, let me do the supply side first. Then I'll come to the demand side. Now this model is a single variable model. What is the meaning of a single variable model? Means there is only one thing which changes in this economy, and that is output. This could be called output. This could be called GDP. Okay, so it's a single variable model, only output or GDP being the only thing which can change. Nothing else is assumed, nothing else is endogenous in the model. Okay, in this model, only output changes. So it's a single variable model. So when you have to, so first we'll understand the graph of how does a single variable model actually work. In a single variable model, we have output, which is our only variable on the x-axis. What is on the y-axis? So if there is only one variable and that is on the x-axis, a function of y is on the y-axis. So any function of y can be put on the y-axis. And here we are going to put expenditure on the y-axis. Or just any function of y. Expenditure is also a function of y. So it's just a function of y. I'll just put some function of y here. Okay, so this is how a single variable model works. If there is y, then that is the function of y. Now, in terms of supply of this economy, so let's say the supply side of the economy. We don't really draw the supply. We just say that in this economy, there is something called an identity. There is an identity which says that total expenditure that is made in the economy is equal to the total income which is earned in the economy, is equal to the total output which is produced in this economy. Okay. So how does this identity come? Now the total, if only people spend, so expenditure is what people spend. Whatever people spend is whatever can be earned. So expenditure must equal income. And if people have spent, means something was produced. So production must match expenditure, must match income. So all the three must be the same. Okay. So the output, which is our y-axis, x-axis, is what is the supply. That is the supply, that is the expenditure. Okay. So to draw the expenditure, I'm actually going to now draw a 45-degree line. Now, what is the meaning of a 45-degree line? A 45-degree line is nothing but a line which will divide this graph into two equal parts. At this line, anything that I put here will match it here. So it makes this point and this point is the same. If this point is 10, this point is also 10. A 45-degree line just equates the output, which is on the x-axis, with the expenditure, which is on the y-axis. Okay, so this is called the aggregate supply curve in the SKM, or it is called the actual expenditure curve in the SKM. Okay, so this is called the aggregate supply curve in the SKM or the actual expenditure curve in the SKM, because supply, expenditure, income, output are all the same. Okay, so this is the supply side. This is what the producers have chosen to produce. Okay, so I'll write that down. The aggregate supply or the actual expenditure line this is what the producers have chosen to produce. This is what the producers are producing. Okay, so this is the supply side, that is it. So whatever is the output, that is what the producers are chosen to produce. So we simply just draw a 45-degree line, we match the output with the expenditure, and that is done. Okay, this is called the aggregate supply or the actual expenditure side. All right, so I hope this is good with everyone. Then we will come to the second part of the economy, which is the long part of the economy, which is what we need to understand. And that is the demand side of the economy. Right? So we all have till now, I hope I have made clear that this economy is a demand-driven economy. In this economy, output can only be moved or shifted or increased by the demanders in the economy. So then, who are the demanders? Who demands goods? Okay, so let us look at the answers to that. Who demands goods? So people like you and me. Who are people like you and me? They are called households. Right? People like you and me are called households. Households demand goods. They demand something. Their demand is called consumption demand. Households demand consumption demand. So they demand goods for final consumption. So when they demand goods for final consumption, products are sold in the economy. Now, actually, the statistic goes that GDP, our gross domestic product, the total national output, consists 75% of goods which are produced to meet this consumption demand. So this is the highest component in our GDP. It's the sum total, okay, maximum. So these are dependent on households consuming goods. So then we have to understand how do households make these consumption decisions. So I'm going to come to that in a while. Right now, I'm just stick to who are these demanders. So households are the demanders. Then firms are the demanders. What do firms demand? Firms demand goods to invest. So firms make investment demand. Okay. Then there is the government. Government demands goods. Government could demand any kind of good, whether it could be consumption demand, investment demand, or anything. Okay, so government also, and this is just called the government demand. Okay, then there is the rest of the world. Rest of the world means people who want to buy Indian products, exports. So there is a rest of the world sector for which there is an export demand. Okay, so let's just call it trade demand. So demand comes from these four sections. In any economy, demand comes from these four sections. Okay. So this forms the demand side of my model. So what is the demand side of my model? So which can also be called aggregate demand, So aggregate demand is actually a sum of consumption demand, investment demand, government expense demand, and net exports demand or trade demand. Okay. So the demand side of the economy consists of these. Total demand comes from these four sectors. Is this clear, everyone? So if the total demand is coming from these four sectors, we now need a way to map this demand or calculate this demand. Okay, so now we are going to calculate each of the demand for each of these four sectors. Okay. Now, for simplicity purposes, for the time being, I am keeping net exports as 0, just for the time being, for right now. Okay, I am saying that this is a closed economy. May not be, but just for now, I will expand on it later. I will do away with this assumption once we are through with the simple model. So C plus I plus G plus Nx. For simplicity, Nx plus 0. So if Nx is 0, then what is my demand? C plus I plus G. Okay. All right. So my aggregate demand is C plus I plus G. Okay. Now let us understand the how these are calculated. Consumption demand. So the first and one of the most important is the consumption demand, right? So consumption demand is a function of what? So today you and me are consumers. How do we choose to spend our money? Now, there are many theories on this. If you are an economic student, you will know that there are many hypotheses to model this consumption demand. Okay, so consumption demand can be dependent on, the most important factor is how much money you earn. Okay, if you earn a lot, you are going to spend a lot. If you earn less, you are going to spend less. Okay. Then it is also dependent on the kind of person that you are, whether you like spending, you like consumption, or you like saving, you like investing, and so on. So it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on your income. It depends on your savings. It depends on your wealth. It depends on many things, right? In Keynesian economics, consumption demand is only a function of income. Current income. Current income meaning this year's income. Consumption demand is only a function of current income, which is this year's income. Is this realistic? No. Because if it was only a function of this year's income, that would mean you and me, or you should not be consuming anything. Okay, because you don't really have any income. So you are actually dependent on your parents' savings or your parents' wealth or your parents' income. So it is not realistic to assume that consumption is based only on current income. It's not. But as I said, this is a very simple model with very simple assumptions. To start off, we are going to assume that consumption is not dependent on savings, not dependent on wealth. We are only going to assume that consumption is depending on your current income. So Keynes has come up with a very simple consumption function. This is the Keynesian consumption function. And what is the Keynesian consumption function? It says consumption is equal to C bar plus small c into y. Okay, so what are these terms? This is the total consumption. this is C bar is some minimum consumption that a person will make when his income is zero. So even if there is no income, to survive, you need to make some little level of consumption. That minimum level of consumption is called C bar. Okay. Then this is small c. Small c stands for marginal propensity to consume. Small c stands for marginal propensity to consume. Okay, I'll talk about what this is in a minute. And Y stands for income. Okay, so let me first talk about what is this marginal propensity to consume. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break of 5 minutes here. I think you need a break to come back and concentrate on this. So let's just take a break of 5 minutes. Let's come back. So it's 10:50 right now, 10 minutes. So we'll resume back at 11. So the Keynesian consumption function. Yeah, the Keynesian consumption function. So this is the equation that we are working with. We'll study each of the elements separately. So the first element in this function, okay, the first element in this function is C bar. So what is C bar? C bar is the minimum level of consumption if for someone income is zero, or if income is zero on aggregate also, consumption will not go to zero. People will consume, let's say, through their borrowings. So if Y is equal to zero, consumption is C bar. Okay. Then when people start earning money, if Y becomes positive, so this is if Y is equal to zero. Then if Y becomes positive, then what do people spend on consumption? So they spend a fraction of their income on consumption, right? They spend a fraction of their income on consumption. Fraction money. So what if, let's say 75% of their income is consumed, 50% of their income is consumed, something like that. So they spend a fraction of their income on consumption. That fraction is called small c. Okay, and that fraction is, the formal definition of that fraction is something called dc by dy. Okay, so now we are getting in differentiation, and to do this, you need differentiation. So if somebody's base is bad, please revise. You need basic, very basic differentiation for this. What is the meaning of dc dy? It is the change in consumption because of change in income. So this basically means if, let's say, income increased, the change. So let's say your income is 10,000, it changed to 11,000. So the change in income was 1,000. So that's the increase in income or the change in income. The change in income led to how much additional increase in consumption. So let's say because of a change in the total consumption at 10,000 was, let's say 5,000 rupees. If the income increased to 11,000, consumption, let's say, increased to 5,500. So the increase in consumption was 500. So change in income by change in consumption, dc dy, or change in c by change in y, is half. So small c is half. Okay, and as I said, small c is called the marginal propensity to consume. right? Small c is called marginal propensity to consume. So MPC or small c is usually between 0 and 1, right? That's obvious. Like in this case, it is half. It is between 0 and 1. It can't be more than 1. It can't be less than 0. So MPC lies between 0 and 1. There is another term which you may be wondering about. That is total consumption by total income. For example, in our example, 5,500 is the total consumption and 11,000 is the total income. In this case also, it is half, but it may not be the case always. So this is called total consumption by total income. This is called average propensity to consume, or APC. Change in consumption by change in income is called MPC. Okay. So what we use here is MPC. What is the change in consumption due to each additional increase in income? That is what is MPC. Okay. So it is not APC, it is MPC. One thing we can remember. So let's look at the consumption function. Let's look at the consumption function. This is the consumption function. Now, what is APC? That is C by Y. Okay, so this is APC. Or okay, so this will be C bar by Y plus small c. Okay, so APC, this is MPC. Let me write this as MPC here. Right, so you can see that APC and MPC are different. Okay, can they be the same? What will be the case in which they will be the same? If consumption doesn't have this term at all, C bar. If consumption is just equal to small c into Y, then small c is MPC. And if I take out APC, it is going to be so there can be a possibility that APC is equal to MPC, may not be the case always. In general, it is not true. In this case, C bar is 0, right? So if C bar is 0, then they are the same. If C bar is not 0, then they are not the same. All right, so this is about the consumption function. So I hope the consumption function is clear. The consumption function is now C is equal to C bar plus small c into Y. Now we have to draw this function. So we are going to keep. Now, if you notice, consumption this is a function of Y, some function of Y. Okay, because this is C bar plus small c into Y. So there is only one variable, which is Y. So you can put f of Y here and you can put Y here. Okay, and how do we graph it? So when income is 0 or when Y is 0, consumption is C bar. And then when income increases, consumption increases according to small c. So for that, we have an upward sloping line with a slope of small c. So this is C is equal to C bar plus small c into Y. So this is the consumption function graphed, and that is the consumption function in equations. So the consumption function is done. So if we draw it, it's going to be a line upward sloping with a slope of small c. If we're going to write it, we are going to write it like this. So out of our 3 demanders, households which provide consumption function is done, which provide consumption demand. Next, we come to firms with investment demand. Now, firms with investment demand is, what is business investment a function of? What can business investment a function of be? So when firms decide to invest, they will basically invest based on what is the expected profit level, which will depend on what is the cost of funds, what is the business sentiment, what is the business opportunity. There are many things that firm risk-taking ability of the entrepreneur, many things on which the investment decision of the firms take place. So how do we model it in the simple Keynesian model? In the simple Keynesian model, investment is taken care of in two ways. Either it is assumed to be constant. Okay, why? Because investment is dependent on interest rate, which is constant, business expectations, constant. So everything that investment is actually a function of is assumed to be constant in this model, which is why investment is assumed to be constant. So investment is constant. So either investment is constant or investment is taken to be some function of y. Okay, so a positive function of y. Okay, something like investment is equal to IY. So y will increase, I will increase. So it could be made, this is a part of the question experience. So we can do all the theory in the world. Okay, I can just keep doing this theory, but questions are something else. Questions are puzzles, as I said. They need to be worked out. Okay, you need to know the theory, but you also need to have problem solving skills. So this is just a variation in making you solve a puzzle. Okay, so this is a possibility. So this possibility is only for questions. Investment is it could be a function of income. If I have more money, I can maybe buy an airline. I can do anything. So if I have money, I can do that. So it's possible to spend your money on investment, but rarely does that happen. Investments are usually made from borrowed funds, from funds of others, from banks, because you don't want to take risk on your own capital. So usually it is the investment is made on borrowed funds, not own funds. So it is a small investment is less dependent on income. And especially today's times, everything is startups, right? So they don't have their own money. It's they borrow that money. So investment is a function of can be a function of that. So very simple again. If I have to draw this, so this is a function of y, right? On the y-axis. So if investment is not a function of y, so income is 0, but investment is something. Let's say this is I bar. So this is how the investment curve will look like. Okay. Sometimes investment is this, as I said, it is equal to IY. So then what will happen? Investment will be an upward sloping line with a slope of I. Let's say this is the slope I. Or if in a question they tell you investment is combination of both, it is I bar plus IY. So let me remove the bar here. Investment is I bar plus IY. So this is like the consumption function. So you will then just shift this I line upwards. This is the same slope. This. So then this is I bar plus IY. This is the investment function. Or just I, this is the investment function. Or I bar, this is the investment function. So depending on what the question tells you, gives you as the investment function, you can use either. In general, what is the investment function? in general, this is what you take it as. Okay, the rest of it is variation, problem solving again. So this is the investment function. Clear? Then the third, government expenditure. Now, government expenditure is like investment. It is the spending of the government. Now, what does government expenditure depend on? Usually, it depends on the government policies. Okay, so government expenditure can also be taken as two things. Either it is constant, like investment. So either government expenditure is constant. So what does it depend on? Government policies which are outside the scope of any book. So it is just assumed to be constant. Whatever it is just there. Or it could be taken as a function of income. What function? Typically, a function of tax income. So what is tax income? So tax income is the income that government takes from us as taxes. Again, tax income can be taken as constant, or it can be taken as a fraction of income, T being the tax rate. Okay, so this, it could be tax income. So G can be actually either. It could be taken as just by itself. It could be taken as a function of taxes. This is also called per unit tax. It is also called proportional tax. Okay, so proportional tax, per unit tax, any of them. It could be a function of proportional tax, tax income, taxes earned. It could be a function of total taxes, which are also constant. So G can be made a function of anything, right? Now, how does it change things? I will come to all of that later. What makes it, how does it make it different? Again, all puzzle solving, mathematics, we'll come to that later. For now, I have just again put up the possibility in front of you that G could be a function of many things. And within that possibility now, I'm just going to again draw the simplest possible amount of G. So again, this is y, this is a function of y. Now G is not a function of y, so G is here. It is constant. Whether it is equal to taxes or not, right now not material, immaterial. This is government expenditure typically. Okay, so this is what it is. So now let's move on. So now we have the three sectors of the economy. And we have the households with consumption demand, government with investors with investment demand, government with government demand. So what is the aggregate demand in this economy? Which is equal to okay, so this is the aggregate demand, which is in this economy, C plus I plus G. C is C bar plus small cy, I is I bar, G is G bar. So I can, what I've then done is I have grouped together C, I, and G. So why C, I, and G? Because these are autonomous components. These are autonomous components. What is the meaning of autonomous components? They are independent of Y. They are not a function of Y. These are induced or endogenous components. They are a function of Y. Okay. So I've grouped together the autonomous and the endogenous components. So my aggregate demand is finally equal to A bar plus small cy. Let me also graph it right here. So what did we have? We basically have an I bar, which is, okay, let me draw this. I bar, which is horizontal. We had a G bar, which is horizontal. We had a C function, which is upward sloping. So if I have to add these three up, it's going to be a horizontal addition. And the new graph is just going to be the same slope as C, because only C has slope, but intercept of I plus C plus G. So a slope like this. So if this is I, this is G, this is C, bar, 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 this is small c into Y. So this is the aggregate demand curve, which is going to be C bar plus I bar plus G bar as the intercept, which is A bar as the intercept, and the slope as C. This is the slope as C. Okay. So this is a very typical mathematical formulation of the slope, the intercept slope form for an equation. Okay. Right. So this is the aggregate demand curve. Let's talk a little bit more about this curve. So aggregate demand is C plus I plus G, which I've just told you is A bar plus small c into Y, right? Now this aggregate demand curve is also called the planned expenditure curve. This aggregate demand is also called the planned expenditure curve. Okay, planned expenditure meaning this is the expenditure that the different sectors of the economy, households, investors, government, this is the expenditure that the different sectors of the economy plan to do. Okay, so this is what they plan to spend. Okay, so what they plan to spend is this. What the producers plan to produce is this. What the producers have actually produced is the output which have been created. So the producers have created certain output, which is Y, which is the actual output produced. The demanders plan to spend only this much, A bar plus CY. So what is equilibrium? Equilibrium meaning is achieved when the actual expenditure is equal to what was planned. This is equilibrium, when actual expenditure is what was planned. So let's equate the two. Actual expenditure was Y. This is C bar plus I bar plus G bar. plus small c into y. So if I find equilibrium, since equilibrium has been achieved because the actual has been equated with planned, we can find out y star. So 1 minus small c into y star is equal to c bar. So this is y star. I'll write it again here. So this is the equilibrium output. This is the output when once achieved will remain the same like this forever unless something else changes. That is the meaning of equilibrium output. It stays the same unless something changes. So this is the output at which producers will keep producing Y star. Producers will produce Y star. Consumers will demand Y star. So there will always be matching of demand and supply, and there will always remain equilibrium. So this is the mathematical equilibrium which has been achieved in the economy. Let's come to the graphical derivation. So this was the planned expenditure. This was the actual expenditure. Planned expenditure, this is y. It's a function of y. Or expenditure. The actual expenditure is the aggregate supply curve. This is the aggregate demand curve, which is the planned expenditure. Okay, so when they both are equal, that's the point of equilibrium. Okay, this is the point of equilibrium. Right, now this is the point of equilibrium. We've done this. The point where actual is equal to planned, we've done. Now we are going to come to something called stability of this equilibrium. Is this equilibrium stable? What is the meaning of stable? The meaning of stable is what I'm going to come to now. Say this is Y star. So let's say this is some level of GDP. I'll take an example. Let's say this is per person $5,000 is this level of GDP. This is the equilibrium level of GDP. But right now, this economy is at $2,000. So right now, the economy is at $2,000, but equilibrium is $5,000. Stability means, will the forces in this economy, will the market forces of this economy bring the output from Y0 to Y star? Will the forces in the economy take the output towards equilibrium? Let's check. Now at Y0, what is the aggregate demand? It is this much. Let's say this is the level of aggregate demand at Y0. What is the supply? It is this much. So what does it mean? At Y0, demand is more, supply is less. If demand is more and supply is less, what is it that you need to do? You need to increase output. So you're going to move ahead. Let's say to Y1. Y1, all the same thing. Demand is more, supply is less. You will move ahead and you may finally reach Y star. So the economy is going to take you towards Y star. Okay. Now this is the explanation according to the supply and the demand. I also want to give the explanation according to, okay, let me finish the supply demand explanation, then I'll come to the planned expenditure and the actual expenditure explanation. So this is if output is less than the equilibrium. What if output is more than equilibrium? Let's say output is Y2. What is the supply then at this level? What is the demand at this level? So supply is more than demand. So if supply is more than demand, what will you do? You will reduce your output, right? So it is again moving towards E. So this is a stable equilibrium. The forces in the economy are helping you move towards the equilibrium. Okay. So this is the overview. Now I'm going to give you a more nuanced definition. Okay. Let's say supply is more than demand. Okay. This is also called that the actual expenditure is more than planned expenditure. What does that mean? The producers have produced more than what the demanders are planning to buy. If the producers produce more than what the demanders are planning to buy, what happens to this output? This output level adds up into unplanned inventory accumulation. This level of output goes into unplanned inventory accumulation, meaning there is an addition to the output, the produced output, which you had not planned. You had not planned to keep this level of stock. So let's say you had planned that you will sell 10,000 units, but you could only sell 6,000 units. So 4,000 unit became your addition to stock. This was unplanned. You didn't plan this. So when you had 6,000 level of 4,000 level of stocks, which you didn't plan to keep, what will happen? Next year, you will obviously produce less. So you will produce less. Okay. Now the opposite thing happens here. You had planned that this will be the, you will produce 2,000 units, but the demand is 4,000 units. You wanted to keep stock of some amount, so you always maintain certain stock level, right? Now, because there is this additional demand, you had planned to keep, let's say 2,000 as you let's say wanted to sell 2,000, and let's say you wanted to keep 2,000 as stock. Okay. But because the demand became 4,000, you could keep nothing as stock. So this is actually unplanned inventory decumulation. You wanted to sell 2,000 and keep stock of 2,000, but you couldn't keep any stock because there was so much demand. So what will you do? Next time you will not produce just 4,000, you will produce more. So then you will increase your output. Okay. So this is the formal explanation of how does the demand and supply work and how the economy works to bring, how the forces work to bring the economy to equilibrium. Okay, so this is how the whole system works. There is aggregate supply, there is aggregate demand, and this is the equilibrium. And this is the equation of that equilibrium. Now, the question that some of you had asked me in the beginning, this is the last part of today. What can the government do? Okay, so let us work on that. So this bit probably I'm going to repeat in the next class because I don't remember I've done it with, the other students or not. Then I'm going to do it with you all. I definitely have not done it with the other batch, I think. So let me keep it actually common so that if some of you need to shift batches, it's going to be just seamless. So this is equilibrium. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is introduce taxes in this equation. So here, if you notice right now, this equation just has government expenditure, no taxes. So let's introduce taxes. How do you introduce taxes? So this Y is actually income, right? Now you can't spend what you earn, or you can't spend a proportion of what you earn because there's government to take away a part of it as taxes. So what you need to calculate is something called disposable income. Okay, what you need to calculate is something called disposable income. So what is disposable income? It is denoted as YD. What is YD? Y income minus taxes. Let's say it could be T or it could be TY, it doesn't matter. Okay, so just writing as taxes, income minus taxes, plus if there is any transfers that any government agency has made to you. Okay, so you get a scholarship, let's say, or you get an aid. So income that you earn minus the taxes that you need to pay plus the transfers that you will make, that you will get. So this is actually disposable income. Now again, usually the transfers are taken as zero. Okay, usually transfers are taken as zero. So usually it is just this. So I'm just going to keep it at this for now. So this is disposable income. So actually this equation is consumption is a function of C bar plus small c into YD, disposable income. And if I open it up, it is C as C bar plus small c into Y minus T. Clear? This is how taxes come into this equation. So my equation is Y is equal to C bar plus small c Y minus T plus I bar plus G bar. Got it? So if I introduce taxes, you will have a new equation, and this is how it will look like, and this is how taxes will come. Right? Okay. Then the last thing that I'm going to do today before I sign off is going to be the multiplier process. Okay, so what is the multiplier process? So we'll take the simple equation without taxes. Okay, and assume that my economy is right now, it needs a push, not doing very well. So if it needs a push, then government gives it a push. G increases by, let's say 1000. Whatever G increases by, we'll call it change in G. So government, my economy needs a push. G has to increase. Government pushes it by increasing government spending. G increases by 1000, and it could increase by anything. That amount is called change in G. How much of this change, how much does this change in G influence the actual output? how much does this change in G influence the actual output? Okay, that is the question. If government spending increases by 1,000, does it mean income will also increase by just 1,000? So let's see what is the multiplier process. So this is a multi-year process. Okay. So in, let's say, 2021, government increases the expenditure by change in G, let's say. Okay. So in 2021, income will increase by change in G, because if right hand side has gone up by 1,000, left hand side, which is equal to the right hand side, must also go up by 1,000. Okay. So change in G is equal to change in C. So the increment in Y is change in G for 2021. What will happen in 2022? If people have more income, they are going to spend more. Okay. So in 2022, consumption will go up by C times this increase in Y. Okay. So consumption will go up by C times this change in Y. So if consumption went up by this amount, if this went up, in 2022, again, income will go up by this amount because more is being spent. So in 2022, income will go up by C times of the previous amount. In 2023, again, since income has gone up by C times G amount, consumption will go up by C times the previous amount. So income will have to match that. 2024, consumption will go up by, now I think you're getting the drift. So income will go up by C times change in G. 2025, consumption will go up by C4 change in G. Income will go up by C4 change in G. Okay. So this way, this will keep going on. Somewhere it will come to a stop again. There will be no further increments. That is called equilibrium. After a multi-year process, after a point has come that no further increments are being experienced because of this initial increase in G, then again, G income is the same every year. Right now, income is increasing every year. But finally, income will come to one point. The increments will stop coming. So that is called the new equilibrium level of income. What is that new equilibrium level of income? The new equilibrium level of income will be the income which we achieve by an addition of all these increments. So what is the total change in Y? Multi-year, all years added together. That is change in G plus C times change in G plus C square times change in G plus C cube times change in G plus C4 times change in G up till infinity. So if I take change in G common, this comes to 1 plus C square plus C cube plus C4 up till infinity. And this is a geometric progression. And this is the sum of this up till infinity is equal to 1 by 1 minus C. So this is going to be 1 by 1 minus C, where C is the factor which is increasing every year. Okay. So total change in Y is change in G plus 1 by 1 minus C. So total change in Y is equal to change in G by 1 minus C. So if example, let's take an example now to understand this point well. If change in G is, let's say, 1,000. So government expenditure in 2021 was increased by 1,000. Small c is, let's say, 2 by 3. Put it here. So what do we have here? We have that if change in G was 1000 and C was 2 by 3, what is the total change in Y, total change in equilibrium income as a result of the increment in G? The answer is 3000 based on this formula. So change in G was only 1000, but change in income is 3000. It is 3 times. And the reason is called the multiplier process. This is the multiplier process. That increase in G happens once, but corresponding increase in consumption happens many times. The result of that is that the increment in Y is actually much more than the increase in G. So the result of that is if you want to increase your income by 3000, you don't need to increase government expenditure by 3000. You need to increase government expenditure by only 1000, and you can increase income by 3000 with only a 1000 increase in government expenditure. All right. So that is the multiplier process. And I'm going to show it diagrammatically the next time. But in terms of the process, so every time we don't actually have to do this, and this. That's not required. We have a simple way. What is a simple way? That is through differentiation. So if Y is equal to C plus C bar plus small c Y plus I bar plus G bar, if G increases by 1000, all we need to do is take total differentials. If I take the total differential, this is going to be dy is equal to dc bar plus small c dy plus di bar plus dg. Okay. Now out of this, dc bar is 0 because that has not changed. Di is 0, that has not changed. So this is what I'm left with, and I can simplify. 1 minus c dy is equal to dg. So dy is equal to dg by 1 minus c. And then we simply put in the numbers that we had found out, and we got the same formula that we had got with the multiplier process, just using differentiation. Now, most of the questions that come in your exams using this topic come from the multiplier process. Okay. So you will be given an equation and they will start manipulating. Government G will be made a function of taxes. I will be made a function of income. Disposable income will be introduced. They will say this is equal to this. So what will happen? So now the theory is this. Okay. The theory is this. Now what you need is problem solving skills. Okay. Now you need to understand how to solve problems based on this theoretical base. So next class, I'm giving you homework based on differentiation. So there will be questions asked for you. What will happen if taxes increase? What will happen if tax rate changes? Whatever. All only based on differentiation. So a document has been uploaded. I can show you that document once. So this kind of a document has been uploaded on your student portal. These are the past year questions. of multipliers that have come. Now, I want you to, in the time before the next class, I want you to study the theory that we have done. Read the book. ManQ is the book. Read the book, study the theory, and then try to solve these questions, which I will solve in the next class. So I want you to solve them and try them before we come to the next class. They're all based on differentiation and they're all based on the multiplier process. Right? So this is what it is. This is the differentiation process. You have to try the questions and I'll see you in the next class.